Today, we are talking about environment. For me, so many people tell me when they work with the equation that environmental fit is the game changer. It's the piece that they hadn't thought through. And we think it's absolutely key to career success and satisfaction. It's one of the four components of the career equation, and all four are important, but I think it's the one that is definitely the most overlooked. So today we want to support you to really think through the environment that helps you thrive.
You'll spend 80,000 hours at work. You're here because you want those hours to count. Hi, I'm Zoe Schofield.
And I'm Erica Sosna. A warm welcome to the Career Equation podcast. On this podcast, we take time out from our award-winning careers consultancy to share a game-changing formula to help you solve the sum of your life.
Each week, we and our guests use the career equation to explore their story so far and help them unlock the secrets of a fulfilling career.
You know, we focus so much normally on like the role, the skill, finding the right industry, the right pay, that sometimes we forget that the crucial element of where it is that we do our work, where that work is situated. And by that, we mean your work environment, the pace, the culture, the physical elements, and the values of the people, the leaders, who you come in contact with, the clients, the people you serve, the quality of the support that you're given to do your job. All of those things can either fuel and really ignite your growth or massively stifle it. And just like a plant needs its own unique combination of soil chemistry and sun and shade and water, so you too have a specific set of conditions that are necessary for you as an individual to thrive. And each of us needs different kinds of nutrients and locations in the garden of life in order to have an environment that really nourishes and supports us. So this episode is all about you and your ideal environment. And we'll talk to you a little bit about why we think environment makes a huge difference and why we've seen that it matters, how you can begin to start thinking through your own ideal work environment and refining and honing and playing with minimizing the frictions that impede your growth and success, how the career equation can support you with getting clarity about what that sweet spot looks and feels like. And then we'll also, as ever, give you practical examples from previous pod episodes where people talk about their environments, where we think about our own careers and their environments, the ones that have helped, the ones that have definitely hindered, and offer you a number of kind of practical takeaways so that as managers and leaders, you can start to really be conscious about the areas of influence around your environment and the environments that you create and people work in. And as individuals, we can be more discerning and more empowered to make good quality choices about the environments that support us to do our best work. So a very warm welcome to another episode.
And, and this matters because ignoring the sort of environmental fit element of the equation can lead to some pretty horrid things. It can lead to burnout, poor mental health, poor physical health and well-being, let alone frustration and just this feeling like you're on a career treadmill, but you're not really going anywhere because it just feels like, really, this again. And perhaps that sort of sense of, I don't really understand because this job on paper should be brilliant for me. I've got the skills for it. I care about the subject. I can see the impact in my work. Something doesn't feel right. And I've definitely had those conversations with people that I've coached in the past. And therefore, it can impact your personal performance. And actually, as an organization, when you're looking at poor performance, it isn't just about the goals and the measures. It's about how do we create the environment which this person can do their best work? What's our responsibility in that? And what's their responsibility in that as well? There's a conversation to have definitely on an individual level, let alone a team and a department and an organizational level. And what happens quite often is people then begin to blame themselves when they feel that it's not right. But the reality is it could just be right work, right role, wrong setting. And when we think of that organizationally, when you think of big organizations as being, you talked about soil as being a big garden, it's about finding where people need to be planted in a way so that they can do their best work. And just like we would if we were planting stuff in our gardens, where's the place they're going to thrive?
And of course, within one organization, there are multiple different
yeah.
parts in the garden. So it isn't necessarily the case that you cannot find a home where you can perform optimally within your organization. But you do need to be able to know what's working and not working in order to ask the question about how to make the adjustment.
Yes. And what you want is that locus of conversation happening in the organization, because you don't want them going off and finding their soil somewhere else. You want to know that, have we exhausted all the opportunities here for you to feel like you can do your best work? And so from an environment perspective, what we want to do from that equation point of view is reduce and minimize any level of friction, if you like, in that environment, where we've not got sort of misaligned work or a toxic culture or the wrong values or people working with the right type of people and those kinds. We want to be thinking about how do we minimize that friction, because any friction in the environment impedes the ability for your skills to really shine, your impact to be noticeable, and you to feel aligned with your passions.
I feel like sometimes with environment, it's not even that either side is wrong. It's just square peg and round hole.
Yeah.
I find that so often in our coaching practice, in discovering that actually it was an environmental issue, it gives people so much relief.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Because they're like, why has this job gone so wrong? It should have been a dream job. I should have been excelling. I was absolutely thrilled when I got it. And then I just could not seem to find a way through. And, that can be really, really troubling for people, particularly if it had, negative consequences like financially, practically, emotionally, physically. And being able to just reconcile that sometimes not every environment is going to work for everybody. And there isn't necessarily anything wrong with that environment or wrong with you. It's just a square peg in a round hole. And that's really important too. It isn't always that there is a dysfunction.
Yeah. And when we get it right from a people perspective, obviously from an individual point of view, that energy for the work that you're doing is optimal. You feel like you're being nurtured in a place that really looks after you and
gets you.
Yeah. But you're also taking responsibility for yourself. So it's unrealistic to think that every day I'm going to feel this wonderful energy and it's going to be marvelous. That's not real, is it? So what we need to understand is, what is it that I need to replenish when I've had a tough day or I've had a difficult conversation or I've had some tricky clients? What is it that needs to be replenished? What is it that's going to re-energize you ready for the next day? So we have to take responsibility personally for the whole of our lives and how we be at our best. But also for organizationally, when people are aligned in an environment that really helps them to be at their best, then they are more engaged. Their performance is higher. They're more motivated to stay, because why would they want to swap great soil for somewhere else where it's unknown?
And of course, nothing's going to give us 100% all of the time.
No.
Somebody asked me a great question the other day, actually. They asked me, what percentage of your environmental criteria list should you be looking to have filled when you're looking for a new role? And I hadn't actually ever really, really quantified it before, but I think 70% would be exceptional, right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying that you're going to get 100% because you aren't, right? Even in jobs that you've designed yourself, there are still going to be things that are irritating or tense or difficult. So I think it's also about taking that stock, and we're going to show you how to do that in a minute in the way that we do in the equation, but then also being able to say what's a must, what's a should, and what's a could. So sort of agile criteria definition. What is essential? Without that, I just really go crackers and struggle or feel very isolated. What's a kind of, in an ideal world, this is pretty important to me, and what's a kind of nice to have. And that helps then to get a sense of, actually, if I've got most of the things that really matter to me, then some of those more concessionary things I can be more resilient around or have a sense of humor around or whatever.
I hadn't thought of it like that before. What percentage would I put on the environment needing to be? But it's true. I work a lot from home in a little office that I've tried to make look and feel as nice as I can with the space I've got. I don't have the luxury of a budget that's going to build me a studio in the garden where I can do all of my art and all of my coaching, and it's wonderful. So I have to think about, what are the things I need to do to re-energize myself during the day? So I go out with the dog in the morning, I do a walk. That's my commute to work, if you like. So I have to think about how I create that environment with what I have. So in an organization, those are the same conversations with what we have and what we can tweak and change. How do we make it the best? And for individuals, what else do I need to take responsibility for to make sure I'm at my best in terms of that environment?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was thinking back to when I worked at University of Brighton and had a conversation recently with Jonathan Black, who's the head of careers at Oxford. And he was telling me what a kind of entrepreneurial environment it was. And I was like, that's really interesting, because that's not a word that I would have used for Brighton. And I could have easily have dismissed the whole education careers sector on the basis of my experience in one particular team in one particular area that perhaps had a different pace and style that worked really well for them. So bearing in mind that the more each career experience gives you more insight about actually where am I high performing. Brighton may have found that a more sort of solid, steady approach worked really well. And Oxford is more like, go and make it happen, And of course, that's dictated to some extent by the leadership, and that leadership will change. So in 5 years' time, it could be a completely different team or culture. So bearing in mind that, you want to generate that insight, but also that your experience is very much a moment in time in a particular organization, in a particular team, in a particular economy. And those things are dynamic too. So how do you start reflecting on this kind of question of environment? Let's start giving you some tools. So the first thing is that we ask people to do a bit of a recap around jobs where they felt like they thrived and they felt really alive and engaged and able to make things happen, having lots of agency, and others where they really struggled. And start to just re-envisage the picture of yourself at work in those places and consider what was going on in each, what was different. So things to consider are things like the size of the organization. Was it a large corporation? Was it a global business, a PLC? Was it a scrappy startup? Were you working in a small team with some friends? Were you working on your own independently? What was the location? And what did that look and feel like? Were you remote? Were you hybrid? Were you office-based? Was it a beautiful old building on the banks of the river? Was it a little hut at the end of the garden, and everything in between? And how did that work for you? What things worked? Was open plan amenable? Was it well set up? How was the tech? And then, of course, culture. Culture is huge. So what was the pace like? How formal was it? How steady and rhythmic and ritualized was it in a way that worked for you? Well, how were the meetings? Did people turn up on time? What did people wear? What was the communication style? And again, what was it bringing out in me? And particularly if it was challenging, asking yourself, what was the opposite that I needed that I didn't get is really useful. So those difficult times start to become real gold for defining your environmental criteria. Then you've got things like values. Did the values of the organization align with yours? And when there was friction or dissonance, was there space to explore that? And how was that structured and managed? What was the leadership style? What was the management style? Is it supportive? Is it paternalistic? Is it hands-off? Did you feel micromanaged? And which of those is your preference, right? Because they're all different. To what extent were you supported with your development? How were you mentored to grow? How clear was it where you might go next? To what extent were you left to your autonomous own devices around that? What was the work setting? Was it quiet? Did it have lots of natural light? What was the coffee like? What was the catering? That's always very important. Did you have a slide in reception area? And again, just observing, did that work for me? Did it not work for me? And finally, sort of technology and tools. So thinking about what made it possible and easy to do your job efficiently and effectively, or were the systems constantly crashing and driving you bonkers? So the more that you can start to really get this picture from drawing from your previous history, that's a great place to start. But then there are the other spaces and places that you inhabit, and just thinking about outside of work, where am I really thriving, able to feel in flow, able to feel relaxed and enjoy myself? Because there could be a lot of information there for you as well. And once you identify what worked and what didn't, then you're in a position to make more informed choices about your future roles, and to be able to ask the right questions, to spend time in the environments, and to be scanning for your list of the things that really are essential to help you to do your very best and most exceptional work, to be comfortable. And of course, until we're in an organization, to some extent, we can only make like our best guess, but we could certainly do better research when it comes to talking to people, spending time in the environment, so that we can work either with the existing environment that we have to better suit our needs, or when we choose again to do it from a place of greater self-authority.
And we'll often say to people, when you're assessing, kind of when you've done that sort of historic look back, if you like, of your story so far in terms of the environments, is to think, okay, so if I had to score my environment at the moment out of 10, what would it be? Would it be a 4 or 5? And therefore I've got quite a bit of work to do to push that up? Or actually, is it not so bad and just some minor little tweaks and changes? So that gives you a kind of sense, if you like, a temperature check of where am I now? And then therefore, what are the things that would need to change and where are the opportunities to do that? And it just kind of struck me as we were thinking about looking back over your sort of story so far and thinking about those career highs and lows, is if you're at the beginning of your career, it doesn't mean that you haven't got a past to look over. You know, people often say, I haven't got loads of career experience yet, so how do I do this sort of looking back? But you've got lots of life experience. You're not starting at the beginning of a book. You've got chapters that have gone before, whether that's work experience, whether that's opportunities that you had in education to do projects or to go on trips or volunteering, or there might be lots of things, hobbies and interests that you've had outside, charity things that you might have done. Mm-hmm. You've had lots of opportunity to experience life situations in different environments with different people in different locations. So some of those things will help to remind you about, when did I feel like energized by where I was with the right sorts of people, and when did I not? So still look back, even if you're in those early stages of your career. And environmental fit is just one piece of the career equation that can really help you to make a sense of your previous sort of past and the shape and how to make the future better. And the career equation works alongside in those elements of skills. So working to the skills, strengths, the superpowers that you want to play to and develop further, applying those skills to an area of passion so that you're working on a subject, topic, industry, or a way of being that energizes you, that gets you in a passion, that makes you feel motivated, that you care deeply about. And impact is the third component, which is about knowing that what you're doing is good stuff and that you're making a difference and you're adding value and you feel fulfilled. But all of those three components have to be wrapped up in this wonderful environment that helps you to be at your best, both inside and outside of work, I would say. So the framework can really help individuals get a much better sense of, what is my personal equation? Who am I when I'm at my best? And now how do I tweak and change and navigate options going forward? But from an organizational point of view, it gives you a much better picture of people, who they are from the inside out, not the job title, not the label, not the grade, not the number, the staff number. Who they are as an individual helps them to be seen and heard, and helps you to take away assumptions about what their next move should be and talk honestly and openly about, okay, how do we help you get more of that? And what works for the business and what works for you? Because you want people who feel truly aligned in an environment that nurtures and nourishes them.
Absolutely. And we've had, so many guests who've talked about different experiences of making small or massive environmental shifts, moving to a remote friendly company, changing industries to something that more aligns with their values, getting opportunities to have more flexibility or autonomy, or moving to an environment with more collaborative culture.
Yeah.
I think Susan Emmett's conversation is a really good example of this, because she's had such a wide variety of environments, many of which she talks about, for example, on bricks and mortar, the excitement of kind of working together collaboratively to make something that didn't exist before, and then shipping, getting that article, getting that magazine out there, so that people could enjoy it every week. And that actually that kind of pacey rhythm and the collaboration and everyone kind of knowing their part in it and the dependencies really, really suited her. And then she talked about another environment that was much less collaborative, a little bit more individualistic, motivated on more of a kind of competitive basis, and also just a completely different motivation and rationale, from kind of fee earning to generating a publication. They're like really different. And those environments then require different things, and how that felt quite difficult, quite swinging against the tide, hard to use all of her skills and talents to be effective. And then most recently in her new role at Stantec, actually creating and designing a role on the back of being in that organization and really deeply understanding it and spotting an opportunity to solve a problem already in an environment that she's thriving, but then also adding in a number of other environmental factors to create something that's going to be a big win-win for the organization and for her. So in this case, a head of social value role. That is a really good example of where we can be, really exceptional and innovative, and where we can be deeply derailed just by quite different cultures and different workspaces, and how important it is to be sensitive to that. I think the other good example around that is Melanie Rickey, also with a journalistic background, and now stepping out for the first time at the front. She said that so many times environmentally she's been an amazing champion of others, and that in terms of impact has been really fulfilling for her. But talking about sort of late diagnosis ADHD and discovering where some elements of executive function might have been really much more difficult for her to perform in certain environments than in others. So I'd be really interested to see how this environment of her own design, which perhaps at the moment is a bit more solitary than she would like, I can see that's going to expand into much wider sense of community, is going to support her to be at her best with quite a new agenda in mind as well.
One particularly that comes to mind for me is my episode with Lucy Capon, who is a great example of how a huge shift in environment has made a huge difference to her life. And Lucy's somebody who has really expertise in marketing and telling stories and really working closely with organizations that do good in the world. But she comes from a corporate background in terms of worked in the city, and it was very fast paced, and burnout and stuff starts to be on the fringes of that. And Lucy up sticks, went to Thailand and set up her own marketing consultancy from a cafe in Thailand. So huge change. But it was about, I think, for Lucy, this sort of regeneration of her whole self in terms of her energy, what was nourishing her, but still wanting very much to play to those skills and strengths that she developed and harnessed over years working in the corporate world, to be able to then say, no, I can now apply that in perhaps smaller companies, even where what they're doing is good in the world, but I can help them tell that story. And so for her, using that curiosity that was a real sort of strength, if you like, a superpower of curiosity, and then converting that into storytelling whilst in a stunning environment that really feeds and nourishes her, it was a game changer. And that's, one of the really strong environment episodes that stand out for me for sure.
Yeah, I was ranting about it the other day, wasn't I? Madonna's autobiography.
Yes.
Incredibly rigorous piece of research work by a Reuters journalist. And one of the things that really struck me was like, okay, so there's only like one Madonna, and Madonna is kind of an industry in herself, right? But starting from an environment of Warhol and like Studio 54 and, this kind of vibrant, amazing art scene. And then the AIDS epidemic wiping out a whole raft of collaborators, dear friends, talent, and the kind of shock of that, that environmental shift right, happening to you can happen to any of us in any age and stage, whether it's a merger acquisition, whether the economy goes tits up. Actually losing people in your environment, how that must have shifted. But also very inspired by all the different geographies she's put herself in, and the different collaborators and the different styles and influences that she's built in. So even if you are a one person band in what you're doing, the opportunities to recreate and redesign your environment and to iterate around that as you shift your interests, I think is a really exciting element of environment. And look, both of us have had that experience of environments that helped us thrive, environments we struggled in. Tell us a little bit about your own experience, Zoe.
Reflecting over my own journey, I think the times when I felt constrained were environments where it was, we can't do that. We've always done it like this. The sort of red pen to any of my kind of creative work, and the sort of lack of authenticity. And one of the things that really grates me is when in an organization that you might have wonderful values and glossy brochures about who we are and what matters most to us as an organization, and they're plastered on the walls when you come out the lifts. And if I don't see it and feel it in the action of the leaders and the people and the teams around me, then I don't believe it. And so that sort of authenticity is really important to me.
Dissonance is problematic.
Yeah. So those were the things where I've been in environments where I'm like, that's causing me a little bit of friction. Some of those things were quite fundamental and weren't things that I was going to be able to tweak or change, as well as the sort of look and style of an organization. I remember a huge shock to my system when I went from corporate banking into local government, and into a local government building that was very old, full of corridors, full of tiny little rooms, dark. And I remember I can feel it now, like this sense of like my energy being like, ooh, this is heavy. This is like heavy. And you'd have to go into rooms to speak to people that I'd never met, and they wouldn't look up to you from the desk. And I found that really challenging to start with. But over time, because of transformation projects and some of that stuff I was involved in, aesthetically, the building began to change and the energy level changed. The light came in. We had plants around us. People were working in, yes, of course, we needed small spaces where people could do quiet work, but we had more open spaces where people could collaborate and work together, and different styles of spaces. So for me, I noticed that that's really important to me, I think, in terms of environmental impact on my energy levels, for sure. What about yourself, Erica?
I had this opportunity to work in an environment where our office was in a stately home and it had these beautiful grounds and chandeliers above our heads. There's something about like quite a lot of space above my head that makes a huge difference. Versus my first job in the Home Office, I was working at a building they don't use anymore on Queen Anne's Gate. And it had like bomb-proof windows, very sort of brutalist architecture. And I found it extremely difficult to be in.
Almost.
Suffocating, depressing, stifling, stressful to kind of navigate. I just didn't enjoy being there at all. So I think I'm also very susceptible to environment. And I've been working in sort of co-working hubs for about 20 years now. And I love going to different parts of the world and seeing how they've constructed those spaces and the architecture. And the very first one I worked in, the Impact Hub in Islington in sort of the early 2000s, had this wonderful library. And instead of having chairs in it, there was just like mattresses, couches. Yeah, you could only lie down in order to read a book if you wanted to be in the library. Just those kind of fun things. I always really enjoyed informal, cozy, comfy environments. I think the other thing for me is big deal is pace. So both in central government and as a head of diversity at a variety of universities, when I was internal, I really struggled with what felt to be a really sluggish pace. And indeed, some of these things need to be very thoughtful and they've got machinery for a reason. But for my personality, which is very focused and sprinty and quite, even in how I speak and stuff, it's quite pacey. Often I felt like I was going to fall asleep. And then, as many people have discovered, hybrid working, flexible working, all of that. I started working for a virtual consultancy when I was 23, so about 2002. And at that point was like, okay, this works so much better for me. I just turning up every day, wearing a particular kind of uniform, having the same kind of commute, I was in London at the time, the sort of stress of the tube, all of that. I just was like, this is not, if I don't need to do this every day, there's just no way that I'm going to do it. But I still needed and still do need the variety of not just planting my bum at home and never leaving again, going out to see people, going out to see clients, having real world experiences, group experiences, educational experiences. And I think that sort of hybrid environment has been very important as well.
And I think that's why it is important, isn't it, to think about when you have got a variety in your work life of maybe, we go into the city and we actually get real energy from it because we're not there all the time. And then the flip of like, when I've been in the office at home too long, I'm like, okay, I need to get out. I need to socialize. I need to do some other stuff. So it's noticing and recognizing that the soil, as I love to think of it like that, is not constant. It doesn't stay the same all of the time. And you've got to keep an eye on what have I got to add right now? What is it that I've got to tweak and change to make sure it's staying at kind of an optimum level, I suppose. So let's think about some practical things then for you to take away and get on with, if you like. You can do a bit of a temperature check right now of what does my current working environment feel like? What am I experiencing here in this environment? What is great? What do I love? Why do I love it? What is it giving me personally? What is maybe more of the frictional elements of it? What could be better? And what might make those things better? What do I need to introduce? And what is the impact of it having on your ability to do a great job? Like, how detrimental is it to you to feel like you're playing to those skills and strengths that you love, that you're making a difference and having an impact in a way that's meaningful? And one question I'll often think about is like, if you could design your ideal working environment, if you had a blank canvas and you were like designing it, what would it be like? What would it be full of? Not just from a look and feel, but from the people, from the culture, from the how would you design from a blank page? And just think about, then you can compare and contrast. What do I want versus what have I got? What are the tweaks and changes that I need to do? So kind of conduct a sort of audit of your story so far in terms of environments where you've been at that peak level or not. So think about that. What drained you? What energized you? If you're struggling in your current job, what are the sort of tweaks and minor things that you could just try that might make a difference? And it might make more of a substantial difference than you realize. Who do you need to talk to in the organization that might help you make some of those changes or suggestions that ultimately could help other people in the organization as well? So think about who you need to speak to as well. What about from an organizational point of view for takeaways, Erica, what would you suggest?
Definitely. I mean, really, really important as leaders in organizations to be mindful of a few things. The first is that hiring for cultural fit isn't in itself enough. You need to hire for environmental fit as well. Your pace, your disposition, the levels of sort of flexibility and formality, the way that the space is set up, your ideal office rhythms, all of those kinds of things are really important for both parties to have a successful engagement. Think about your leadership style and the physical workspaces that you're in, your policies around flexibility, your authenticity around your culture. Do you do what it says on the tin? And do some research about how that is currently impacting retention. If you look at engagement data, you'll start to see that these environmental factors are making as big a difference as whether or not someone can progress their career or whether they feel like they're in the particularly right role. And do that also by getting into dialogue. The more that you can get into a dialogue around career conversation on a regular basis, we use the career equation framework, but having some consistent framework that everyone has a shared language around enables people to really articulate what matters most to them, but also what they need in the working environment to be their best. So that question of how do we get the best out of you? What kind of environment supports would really help you right now is a career conversation, and a really important and valuable conversation about how do we create a functional, high-performing environment so that everyone can do and be at their best. And finding out what's working and what isn't is absolutely crucial as a manager.
One of the things that come to mind for me is there is information in your exit data interviews. So, nobody wants people to leave for an environmental reason without having known about it first. So think about how are we exploring when people are leaving through good conversation about the triggers for that and what's mattered to them and what they didn't get and what they're getting elsewhere. Because good exit information will tell you information. The same as if you go on things like Glassdoor and look at what are people saying about our place. There's some honesty in some of those places. So it is certainly worth giving that some consideration as well.
That's a really good point.
And I think from a kind of summary point of view, we said at the beginning, but the environmental fit bit is the bit that's underestimated, but has a significant impact on people's ability to thrive and be at their best at work. And you can put up with a lot of things that you don't have to put up with a bit of tweaking and a bit of adjustment. So it's not just about what we do. It's about where and how we do that work, and the environment plays into that for sure. So whether you're an individual kind of navigating decisions and what I'm going to do next, or you're an organization looking at how do we keep hold of these brilliant people, understanding and shaping the environment for folk is super, super important and will make the difference.
Yeah. And just keep exploring the ideas, the options to build those solutions to remove friction in the environment, because those good ideas may be beneficial to absolutely everybody. And in the spirit of continuous improvement, we want to be refining and honing out the things that stop people performing at their best. So whether that is hybrid flexibility, whether it's different work setups, whether it's mentoring and coaching, and certainly where you're encountering people experiencing tension because of toxic teams and toxic leadership, those are really things that you want to be keeping a channel open so that things can be quickly remedied and got on top of, because a thriving employee in the right environment is way more engaged, more productive, more motivated, will go beyond and would be much more likely to stay and become a great leader and giver in your organization. If you're listening to this and thinking, I would love to get under the skin a little bit more of what environment means to me and how I do my best work, maybe you're at a time where you're at transition and you're thinking about making sense of your story so far and setting out your goals and aspirations for the future, do get in touch with us. You can book a free discovery call with either of us and have a chance to just explore what career coaching could bring to you. Our sessions are very laser focused and we aim to make ourselves redundant in just 6 sessions. So do get in touch if you think that might be important and useful for you right now. And as an individual, if you're feeling stuck and uninspired, just take this opportunity to step back and assess. Is it the job itself and its alignment with your character? Or is it the environment that perhaps is causing the feelings? Being able to be specific helps you to know what levers you need to pull. And if you're an employer, think about where you can explore, where are the kind of data points and information that exists in the organization to explore and find out more so that you can create an environment that people genuinely want to stay in and can really perform in. And just let us know as well, have you ever thrived simply because you made an environmental shift? What was it? What difference does it make? Do share with us on the socials and get in touch and let us know.
And that's it for today, folks. So enjoy exploring your current work environment and what you need to be able to thrive. Connect with us. Tell us how you're getting on, and we'll see you next time on The Career Equation.
My environmental factor right now is definitely a cup of Earl Grey.
Oh, that sounds good. I'm with you.
And a biscuit.
Oh, you've always got my biscuit, haven't you?
See you later.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Career Equation podcast.
Stay connected with us on socials for more career insights, behind-the-scenes moments, and updates on upcoming episodes. And if you'd like to work with us, visit the Career Equation website or click the links in the show notes.
Remember, the Career Equation isn't just a podcast, it's a journey towards unlocking your full potential, enjoying your life, and doing remarkable stuff. And don't forget to share your thoughts and feedback with us. Your input shapes the future of our show.
Until next time, keep solving those career equations and pursuing your path to success. This is Erica Sosna
And Zoe Schofield. Signing off.